In what should have been the happiest chapter of their lives, Ben and Catherine Mullan's story took a heartbreaking and unthinkable turn. The couple, both 31 and newly married, had just tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony in Pontardawe, Wales, surrounded by friends, family, and hopes for a future filled with adventure, career milestones, and quiet Sunday mornings. Ben, a former South Wales police officer who had recently started training as a physiotherapist, and Catherine, a freshly qualified doctor, were the kind of couple you'd root for, grounded, loving, and full of dreams. And where better to kick off a new life together than on the sun-drenched shores of Antigua, a tropical escape that looks like something off a honeymoon brochure. They had chosen the Cocos Hotel, a stunning cliffside resort on the island's west coast, known for its private cottages, panoramic sea views, and the kind of relaxed vibe that makes you forget your phone password. Their honeymoon was going swimmingly. Lazy beach days, island sunsets, romantic dinners, you know, all the good stuff. But as their dream trip neared its end, the unthinkable happened. In the early hours of July 27, 2008, just hours before they were due to fly home, two men broke into their bungalow in what was believed to be a robbery gone horrifically wrong. What unfolded was brutal. The intruders, Caniel Martin and Avi Howell, were both in their early 20s and armed with a gun. They forced Ben and Catherine to kneel beside their bed and then shot them both in the back of the head. Catherine died instantly. Ben, somehow, incredibly, survived the initial shooting. He was airlifted back to the UK in a desperate attempt to save his life, but despite the efforts of doctors, including some of Catherine's colleagues, he passed away a week later, never regaining consciousness. It was a story that gripped the UK and Antigua alike. Two bright young professionals with their whole lives ahead of them, taken in the most senseless and devastating way imaginable. The murder investigation was fast-tracked, and the Antiguan authorities, with help from UK officers, moved quickly. The suspects, Martin and Howell, weren't exactly strangers to law enforcement. They had a history of violent behavior and were soon linked to the crime through DNA, ballistics, and the stolen items traced back to them. Shockingly, the pair were also charged with another murder, that of 43-year-old local shopkeeper Juanita Anderson, killed in her store just 2 weeks after the Mullans were shot. Their spree of violence left a trail of grief in its wake, and the courtroom was packed when the case went to trial in 2011. Over weeks of testimony, the jury heard harrowing details of the couple's final moments and the forensic evidence that sealed the killer's fate. Both Martin and Howell were found guilty on all counts. While Antigua technically still has the death penalty on the books, the judge decided the case didn't meet the threshold of the worst, the legal requirement for capital punishment. So they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Not one life sentence, but 3 each. They'll be spending the rest of their lives behind bars, far from the paradise they destroyed. Out of this unimaginable tragedy, something positive emerged. Determined to preserve Ben and Catherine's memory and continue their legacy, their families established the Mullan Fund. The charity supports students pursuing careers in health and medicine, fields that the couple had devoted themselves to. It's the kind of legacy that turns grief into purpose and pain into progress. Through scholarships and community support, the Mullan Fund has helped young people follow in Ben and Catherine's footsteps, giving back to a world that took so much from them. The murders also shook Antigua's tourism industry and triggered a national conversation about crime and public safety. With international attention focused on the island, officials were pushed to reassess law enforcement procedures and tighten security around resorts. It was a wake-up call, one that led to reforms, but also left a lasting scar on the island's reputation. More than a decade later, the story of Ben and Catherine Mullan still resonates, not just as a tragic tale of a honeymoon gone horribly wrong, but as a reminder of how fragile life can be. Their names live on through the lives they've touched, the students they've inspired, and the love they left behind. It's a story with heartbreak at its core, yes, but also one that shows how, even in the darkest moments, humanity can find a way to carry the light forward. The day had begun full of promise, excitement, and the anticipation of adventure. What was meant to be an exhilarating surfing session on Western Australia's south coast turned into a heartbreaking tragedy that left everyone who witnessed it deeply shaken. For those watching helplessly, especially Stephen Payne's partner, the horror of what unfolded was something they would never forget. Stephen Payne was a 37-year-old New Zealander who had found a deep love for surfing during his university years in Dunedin, New Zealand. Even after moving to Geelong, Victoria, surfing remained a core part of his life. Beyond the waves, Stephen was a respected sales and marketing director, a committed volunteer firefighter, and an adventurous spirit who thrived on travel and outdoor activities. Those closest to Stephen described him as a gentle giant, tall and strong but incredibly kind and laid back. His loyalty to his family, friends, and beloved dog Poppy was unwavering. Alongside his partner of 12 years, Stephen had embarked on a 6-month caravan trip across Australia, excited to chase new waves, explore fresh landscapes, and enjoy the freedom of life on the road. However, just 5 weeks into their journey, fate had other plans. On Monday, March 10th, 2025, Stephen and his partner stopped at Wharton Beach, a remote stretch famed for its excellent surf. The conditions were perfect, and Stephen eagerly paddled out about 50 meters from the shore, surrounded by chest-deep water and accompanied by 2 other surfers. What began as an idyllic moment quickly turned to nightmare. Without warning, a massive shark attacked Stephen with brutal force. His screams shattered the peaceful atmosphere, leaving those on shore, including his partner, horrified and powerless to help. In the chaos, there was no chance for rescue. The water soon turned crimson as the attack continued, and within minutes, Stephen was gone. What started as a rescue operation quickly became a grim recovery mission. Authorities rushed to the scene, closed the beach, and launched marine search teams. Despite their efforts, hope of finding Stephen's body vanished rapidly. A bystander flying a drone inadvertently captured the horrifying aftermath. Footage showing vast amounts of blood, the predator still circling, and chilling scenes seen only by investigators. After 3 days of exhaustive searching, Stephen's remains were never recovered. His surfboard was found floating nearby, bearing deep bite marks that investigators used to identify the shark species involved. But while scientific questions persisted, the painful reality was clear. Stephen was lost forever. His partner, family, and friends were left grappling with an unimaginable loss. In the days that followed, heartfelt tributes poured in from those who loved Stephen. His family released a statement praising him as an incredible man who valued his loved ones deeply, embraced nature with respect, and lived life full of passion and kindness. They recalled how, just a week earlier, Stephen had surfed one of the best waves of his life, sharing a magical moment with a dolphin. Even in the face of tragedy, his family emphasized that of retaliation against sharks or calls for culling. His respect for nature remained intact. Stephen's death was the latest in a series of fatal shark attacks along the Esperon coastline, an area that had experienced 3 others over the past 8 years. Each attack reopened old wounds in the local community and reignited debates about shark safety measures and the hidden dangers of Western Australia's waters. Though the ocean soon returned to its calm state and Wharton Beach reopened, the loss lingered like a haunting shadow. What began as a journey of freedom, adventure, and the simple joy of riding waves turned into a stark reminder of nature's untamed power. Stephen Payne, a passionate explorer and loving soul, became one more name on the growing list of those claimed by the wild sea. On April 17th, 2025, what was supposed to be a peaceful, scenic ride up a mountain in southern Italy turned into a horrifying tragedy. The Monte Phto cable car, which usually offers stunning views of the Bay of Naples and a gentle escape from the bustling streets below, became the center of a devastating accident when one of its cabins suddenly fell more than 100 feet into a ravine. 4 lives were lost, 1 person was critically injured, and questions began pouring in faster than rescue crews could reach the scene. The victims included a British couple, Elaine and Graham Wynne, who were enjoying retirement and living out their dream of traveling the world. Also on board was Janan Suleiman, a young Arab-Israeli woman, and Carmine Parlato, the Italian cable car operator who was just doing his job that day. Janan's brother, Thabe Suleiman, somehow survived the fall with serious injuries and was rushed to the hospital, where he was later reported to be in stable condition. To make things worse, there was another cabin filled with 16 passengers that ended up stranded in the air. Imagine being stuck mid-air, dangling over the mountains, with no idea what just happened or if you were next. Thankfully, all of them were safely rescued, although the weather wasn't exactly on their side. Thick fog and 60-mile-per-hour winds made the operation incredibly dangerous and difficult. What caused this tragedy? Early reports pointed to a snapped cable. Now, in most cable car systems, when something goes wrong with the main traction cable, an emergency brake is supposed to kick in. That's the safety net. But in this case, it looks like the brake didn't do its job. That's one of the key things investigators are digging into. The Italian authorities launched a full-blown manslaughter investigation to figure out whether this was a freak mechanical failure, human error, or something else entirely. The timing of it all adds another layer to the story. The cable car had only reopened 10 days earlier, following routine seasonal maintenance. That naturally raised eyebrows. Was something missed? Was a shortcut taken? It's still under investigation, but people want answers, and fast. The public, understandably, is shaken, and officials are under serious pressure to review safety protocols across all cable car systems in the country. Monte Phto's cable car has been a fixture in the region since 1952. It's not just a mode of transportation. It's a part of local life and a tourist favorite. But this isn't the first time it's been involved in a fatal accident. Back in 1960, a pylon collapsed, killing 4 people. History, repeating itself 65 years later, has only added to the heartbreak and the sense of urgency to ensure this never happens again. The response across Italy was one of shock and sorrow. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who happened to be in Washington at the time, publicly expressed her condolences. Locals, tourists, and the international community alike mourned the loss of lives that day. It was a grim reminder that even something as serene as a cable car ride can carry risks when systems fail. In the end, this incident wasn't just a mechanical disaster. It was a human one. It affected families, shattered travel dreams, and raised tough questions about safety and oversight. As the investigation continues, the hope is that out of this tragedy will come reform, accountability, and better protections to prevent something like this from ever happening again. In 2024, Elizabeth McElmurray set out on what was meant to be a meaningful and emotional journey with her mother. A trip not just for leisure, but for remembrance. What started as a hopeful voyage soon turned tragic, leaving her family and fellow passengers stunned and heartbroken. Elizabeth, 48, was a beloved resident of Wakefield, Massachusetts, where she worked as a manager at Circle K. Known for her deep compassion, Elizabeth's love extended not only to her family and friends, but also to animals. Born in Nashua, New Hampshire, she carried a gentle spirit and was known for her nurturing nature. Those close to her spoke of her warmth, empathy, and the way she could find beauty even in life's most challenging moments. On December 15, 2024, Elizabeth and her mother boarded the Sky Princess, a cruise ship departing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for an 8-day Caribbean voyage. This trip held profound significance for the two women. They were journeying to Jamaica to scatter the ashes of Elizabeth's late stepfather on a beach he had loved. It was meant to be a farewell filled with peace and closure, a way for mother and daughter to honor a man they both cherished. For nearly a week, the trip unfolded as planned. The Sky Princess glided through sparkling Caribbean waters, stopping at picturesque destinations like Cozumel, Ocho Rios, and Georgetown. Elizabeth shared a joyful photo of herself and her mother on their first day aboard, capturing a fleeting moment of excitement and calm before tragedy struck. On December 21st, just one day before the ship's scheduled return to Florida, a devastating event occurred. According to witness accounts and official reports, Elizabeth attempted to go overboard from one of the upper decks, but rather than clearing the ship's structure, she fell roughly 10 stories and landed on a lower lifeboat deck. The fall was witnessed by several nearby passengers who described the moment as horrifying. One person recalled seeing another passenger briefly grasp Elizabeth's arm before losing grip. In the aftermath, ship crew and emergency responders rushed to the scene, administering life-saving efforts. Despite their swift response, Elizabeth succumbed to her injuries. Her death was later confirmed in an announcement over the ship's intercom, leaving the vessel in collective shock and mourning. The Sky Princess's captain addressed the tragedy solemnly, acknowledging the trauma the event had caused. Grief counselors were made available to support affected passengers. Authorities launched an investigation into the circumstances of Elizabeth's fall. Though Princess Cruises confirmed she had attempted to go overboard, they offered few specifics, citing an ongoing inquiry. Elizabeth's mother, crushed by grief, later thanked the crew for their kindness during the ordeal. Her younger siblings paid tribute as well, remembering her as a kind soul with a deep love for both people and animals. Her sister shared a message urging others to cherish life, to speak love often, and to hold close those who matter most. Elizabeth's death was one of several man-overboard incidents reported in 2024, but for those who knew her, it wasn't just another statistic. It was the unbearable loss of a deeply loved daughter, sister, and friend. Her final moments remain surrounded by questions, but her memory lives on in the hearts of those she left behind. One of the most intense moments in Hajj history, the 2006 stampede in Mina, near Mecca, Saudi Arabia. It happened on January 12th during the Hajj pilgrimage, right in the middle of the stoning of the devil ritual. This ritual involves millions of pilgrims symbolically pelting 3 large pillars with pebbles as a gesture of resisting evil. It's one of the most crowded events in an already packed pilgrimage, and the energy is high. The temperatures are sweltering, and the crowd is jammed shoulder to shoulder like a human sea in white robes. Everyone is focused, emotional, and determined to complete this sacred rite. But on that particular day, chaos broke loose. A single stumble, likely caused by someone tripping over a bag, or maybe just an unlucky foot placement, caused a chain reaction. Within seconds, people started falling. Those behind had no idea what was happening and continued to move forward, unaware that the front had turned into a crushing zone. The result was devastating. Bodies piled, people screamed, and the already overwhelming crowd became a death trap. Emergency responders rushed in, but the damage was already done. By the end of it, at least 360 people had lost their lives, with hundreds more injured. Sandals, bags, and personal belongings were left scattered in the aftermath, marking the path of panic and tragedy. This wasn't the first time a stampede had happened during Hajj, and the Saudi authorities faced massive criticism for failing to prevent another disaster. The pressure was on to revamp the entire crowd control system. In response, they went all in. The Jamarat Bridge got a major upgrade with more levels, wider walkways, better signage, and high-tech surveillance systems to monitor and manage crowd movement. They introduced better scheduling systems to spread out the flow of pilgrims, reducing the likelihood of deadly congestion. The 2006 stampede was a wake-up call, one that showed how even the most sacred and well-intentioned events could spiral into catastrophe, if not handled with extreme care. The lesson was loud and clear. When you've got millions of people moving through tight spaces, precision isn't optional. It's everything. Even small missteps, like a stray suitcase or a momentary trip, can snowball into disaster on a massive scale. What made the tragedy even more heartbreaking was the sheer humanity of it all. These weren't just statistics or faceless crowds. These were people who had saved their entire lives, traveled across the globe, and were fulfilling one of the most significant spiritual milestones in their faith. Many were elderly. Many had waited decades for the chance to stand in that very spot. And in the midst of that deeply personal and spiritual journey, they found themselves caught in a crush of panic and confusion. The tragedy didn't just leave physical damage. It left a psychological mark on everyone who witnessed it. The image of white-robed pilgrims helping one another, desperately trying to pull people from the chaos, and offering prayers in the aftermath became symbols of both heartbreak and resilience. The reforms that followed were necessary, but they came at the cost of lives. Since then, every year during Hajj, those reforms have been put to the test. More effort goes into planning, spacing, and protecting the pilgrims. And while challenges still exist, the 2006 stampede remains a grim reminder of what happens when things go wrong. It was a moment in history marked not just by tragedy, but by the determination to make sure such horror is never repeated. On the afternoon of August 26, 2024, What began as an exciting adventure for a group of tourists in Iceland turned into a tragic and unforgettable catastrophe. A guided ice cave tour beneath the famed Breidammerkurjökull glacier, a highlight for many visiting the country, ended with the death of an American tourist and a renewed focus on the dangers of glacier exploration. The unnamed man was visiting Iceland with his girlfriend. Both were American citizens, drawn like thousands of others to the country's spectacular natural landscapes, especially its seasonal ice caves. These formations, carved by meltwater flowing beneath glaciers, are known for their otherworldly beauty, walls of shimmering blue ice sculpted over centuries. Access to these caves is tightly regulated and typically limited to guided tours led by trained professionals who monitor conditions and prioritize safety. That Sunday, the couple joined a group of 21 tourists from various countries for one such tour. Their guide led them deep into the glacier to explore the awe-inspiring caverns. But even the most experienced guides can't eliminate the risks that come with exploring these constantly shifting environments. At approximately 3 p.m. local time, as the group gathered in a ravine between cave sections, a section of ice suddenly collapsed without warning. Massive chunks of ice fell from the walls, crashing down onto the group below. Panic erupted. Screams echoed through the cave as tourists scrambled to escape. In the chaos, several people were buried, including the American couple. Tour guides immediately called for emergency assistance, triggering a large-scale rescue operation that mobilized over 200 responders. The site's remoteness and treacherous terrain posed serious challenges. Rescue teams couldn't bring in heavy equipment and were forced to dig by hand using chainsaws and shovels. With the risk of further collapses looming, time was critical. After hours of relentless work, the teams found the American couple. The man had sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. His girlfriend, though injured, was alive and was airlifted to a hospital in Reykjavik. Her current condition has not been publicly disclosed. Initial confusion arose over whether 2 additional tourists were missing. But upon reviewing the tour company's manifest, officials confirmed only 23 people had participated, not 25 as originally believed. Despite this, rescuers continued to clear all remaining ice to ensure no one else was trapped. The incident sparked immediate questions about the safety protocols governing glacier tours. The Association of Icelandic Mountain Guides called for an in-depth investigation and potential regulatory changes. Although tours are typically run by experts, glacial environments are inherently unpredictable. Authorities emphasized that there were no visible warning signs of instability at the time of the collapse. The tragedy also highlights a growing concern among scientists. As climate change accelerates glacial melting, the structural integrity of ice caves is becoming more volatile. This reality could make such collapses more frequent and harder to predict. The U.S. State Department confirmed the man's death and extended condolences to his family, offering consular support to his injured partner. Icelandic officials are now preparing a report to assess what went wrong and how future accidents might be prevented. What began as a day of awe and exploration ended in heartbreak, a powerful reminder of nature's unpredictable and sometimes deadly force. On the night of December 31st, 2008, the Santika Club in Bangkok, Thailand, was packed with people eager to ring in the new year. It was a scene filled with flashing lights, thumping music, and the excitement of celebrating what was supposed to be a fresh start. But just hours into the celebration, disaster struck. Around 1 a.m., fireworks, part of the New Year's festivities, ignited flammable materials on the club's ceiling, sparking a devastating fire. In an instant, the nightclub was engulfed in flames. The panic that followed was immediate and chaotic. The club, known for its vibrant atmosphere, had a major design flaw: narrow exits and overcrowding. These issues, combined with inadequate fire safety measures, created a deadly combination. As the fire spread rapidly, those inside found themselves with few options for escape. The smoke thickened, the heat intensified, and many couldn't make it out in time. When the fire was finally put out, the damage was clear. At least 67 people lost injured, many of them severely. The loss was felt deeply throughout Bangkok and beyond, as people realized just how close to disaster they had been. What was meant to be a night of joy became one of sorrow and loss. The aftermath of the Santika Club fire was a wake-up call for the city and the nation. Investigations revealed a shocking series of safety violations. The club had exceeded its maximum capacity, and fire exits were either blocked or poorly marked. The fire alarm system was either malfunctioning or completely absent. These critical oversights contributed to the severity of the tragedy, highlighting how easily a celebratory night could turn catastrophic due to a lack of proper safety measures. The fire not only raised questions about the safety standards in place at nightclubs, but it also revealed serious lapses in enforcement and oversight. How could a club operating in one of Asia's busiest cities be allowed to function under such dangerous conditions? The public outcry that followed led to tighter regulations and increased scrutiny of entertainment venues across Thailand. The Santika Club fire became a symbol of the consequences of negligence and the need for urgent reform. It served as a stark reminder that safety must always come first, no matter the occasion. The tragedy also sparked changes in fire safety regulations and emergency response strategies, particularly in crowded venues, ensuring that future events would be safer for everyone involved. For many, the memory of that night remains haunting. It's a sobering reminder that no amount of excitement or celebration can justify putting lives at risk. The Santika fire was a pivotal moment, one that led to tangible changes in how safety is handled in places where large numbers of people gather. As we reflect on the lives lost that night, we also remember the importance of vigilance and responsibility, both in maintaining safe environments and in honoring the lives of those we lost to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again. What was meant to be one of the most joyful times in Sarah Cusac's life, pregnancy and the countdown to her wedding, was suddenly and tragically cut short. A senseless act of violence turned her future into a nightmare, leaving behind grief, shock, and countless unanswered questions. In February 2009, 36-year-old Sarah Cusac from Savannah, Georgia, was eagerly anticipating the birth of her first child. She had spent years working as a chef aboard luxury yachts captained by her fiancé, Cheshire McIntosh. The two shared a deep bond, strengthened by their shared love of the ocean and a life at sea. Their wedding was scheduled for March, and they planned to continue sailing through the Caribbean after the baby's birth in May. Their love story had begun years earlier in Fiji, where Sarah was vacationing and Cheshire was employed at a sailing resort. Their connection was instant, and over time it blossomed into a serious relationship. By early 2009, they had anchored in Puerto Rico, preparing to set sail for the British Virgin Islands. On the morning of February 4th, Sarah went for a jog near the Saba Marina in Puerto Rico. Staying active had always been important to her, even during pregnancy, although she had recently scaled back her workouts. She asked a marina staff member for a good 5-mile route, but somewhere along the way she got lost and ended up on an isolated rural road. It was there that she encountered Eleazar Marquez Nato, a 36-year-old local man with a history of violence. He noticed Sarah jogging alone and with chilling intent prepared an ambush, parking his car with the trunk open. As she ran past, he attacked, forcing her into the trunk and slamming it shut before speeding away. Realizing she had been abducted, Sarah managed to call a marina employee from the trunk, desperately pleading for help and giving details of her kidnapping. She also reached out to her fiancé, Cheshire, telling him she didn't think she would survive. Though always a fighter, in that terrifying moment, she sensed the outcome was inevitable. Authorities immediately began tracing her phone signal in a desperate attempt to find her in time. Tragically, less than an hour after her final call, Sarah's body was discovered in a field. Her throat had been slashed and her life, along with the life of her unborn son, was cruelly taken. Soon after, police apprehended Marquez in his car, which was splattered with blood. Sarah's phone, along with rope and strands of hair, were found inside. Though he initially offered a bizarre excuse, claiming the blood came from an injured horse, he later confessed to the crime. The murder sent shockwaves through the community and devastated everyone who knew Sarah. The case took an even darker turn when investigators learned that Marquez's mother had been convicted in 1992 for murdering 2 children in a similarly brutal manner. Marquez himself had been tried for homicide in 1995, but was acquitted. The revelations led to public outcry over how someone with such a violent background was free to commit yet another atrocity. During court proceedings, Marquez remained emotionless. Prosecutors pursued the maximum penalty, refusing any plea deals. In May, he pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 105 years in prison. Still, for Sarah's loved ones, no sentence could erase the pain of their loss. Cheshire, overwhelmed by grief, requested privacy to mourn. Back in Savannah, their home stood ready for a child who would never arrive. Though Sarah's life ended in terror, her memory endures. As a woman who loved deeply, lived fully, and fought bravely until the end. In July 2018, what was supposed to be a dreamy day of island hopping in Phuket, Thailand, turned into a tragic nightmare. On the afternoon of July 5th, the skies looked a little moody, but two tourist boats still set out to sea. One of them, the Phoenix, carried 89 people, mostly Chinese tourists, eager for a sunny day of snorkeling and sightseeing. The other boat, Serenita, had 42 people on board and was on a similar route. Both were sailing despite official weather warnings about an incoming storm. As the boats made their way back toward Phuket in the late afternoon, the sea turned hostile. Waves swelled, winds howled, and the ocean began throwing a full-blown tantrum. The Serenita managed to survive the storm, returning to shore with drenched but unharmed passengers. The Phoenix, however, wasn't so lucky. Battling violent waves near Koh Hei, Coral Island, it capsized and sank, leaving dozens of passengers tossed into the churning sea. Emergency services launched a high-stakes rescue mission involving divers, helicopters, and patrol boats. The conditions were brutal, with rough waves and murky water making every minute count. Divers searched the sunken wreckage under immense pressure. When the operation finally ended, 47 people had lost their lives, nearly all of them Chinese nationals. It became one of the worst maritime disasters in Thailand's recent history. The aftermath unfolded in a storm of grief, frustration, and action. The Phoenix should not have been out at sea in the first place. Investigations pointed to a chain of preventable issues. The tour company ignored storm alerts. The crew lacked proper training, and the boat itself raised serious concerns about seaworthiness. Reports highlighted structural flaws in the Phoenix and questioned the lack of life jackets and proper safety equipment. The vessel, it turned out, had more holes in its protocol than a slice of Swiss cheese. The Thai government was thrust into the spotlight, along with the tour operators and maritime authorities. Arrests were made, including the captain and the tour company's owner. Public pressure mounted, especially from Chinese officials and the victims' families, pushing for accountability. Authorities in Phuket scrambled to tighten regulations, enforce vessel inspections, and clean up the mess left behind by years of lax oversight. In the wake of the disaster, the tourism industry in Thailand took a serious hit, particularly with Chinese travelers who had once made up a large portion of the country's tourist base. Confidence had been shaken. Sweeping changes were introduced. Stricter rules, mandatory safety checks, and weather monitoring protocols became more than just optional suggestions. Despite the tropical setting, the incident cast a long, dark shadow over Thailand's tourism industry. The image of the Phoenix, lying broken beneath the waves, served as a powerful symbol of what can go wrong when warnings are ignored and corners are cut. The victims' families mourned deeply, while the nation wrestled with the consequences of putting business ahead of basic safety. Phuket, with its turquoise waters and picture-perfect beaches, still attracts thousands every year. But beneath the surface, the memory of that tragic day in July lingers. The legacy of the Phoenix continues to shape safety reforms and remains a chilling reminder that the sea, beautiful as it is, demands respect. In the end, it wasn't just a storm that caused the tragedy. It was the storm of negligence, overconfidence, and avoidable mistakes that sank the Phoenix and changed the tide of Thai tourism forever. Uranus Vanagus Payne was on what should have been a relaxing, joyful family vacation in the tranquil waters of Hannes Cay, a scenic spot just off the Colombian island of San Andres. The Caribbean sun sparkled on the gentle waves as she swam, blissfully unaware that a peaceful day in the ocean was about to turn into an unthinkable tragedy. Just 24 years old, Uranus was a college student from Cajica, a city in central Colombia. Known for her intelligence, warmth, and adventurous nature, she had a bright future ahead of her. This trip to San Andres was meant to be a short break from her studies, a chance to spend quality time with her family and recharge in one of the country's most beloved coastal destinations. On the afternoon of September 8, 2023, Uranus and her family were enjoying the shallow, crystal-clear waters of Hannes Cay. The beach was popular among tourists for its natural beauty and calm environment, making it a favorite for swimmers. As she floated through the water, she had no reason to suspect that danger was fast approaching. Suddenly, a small motorboat sped into the area. Its captain, unaware that swimmers were in his path, didn't see Uranus in time. In a split second, the boat struck her. The sharp propeller blades tore through her body, severing her arm and leg. The water turned red around her as she struggled, and panic spread among the nearby swimmers. Some screamed, others froze in place, overwhelmed by the horror of what they had just witnessed. The boat's captain, realizing the gravity of what had happened, stopped immediately and rushed to pull Uranus from the water. He transported her as quickly as possible to Clarence Lind Newball Memorial Hospital, the island's main medical center, but the injuries were far too severe. She had lost too much blood, and by too late, Uranus had died from her wounds. The accident sent shockwaves across the island and the country. The loss of such a vibrant young life, on a vacation meant for joy and connection, was heartbreaking. The boat operator voluntarily turned himself in, cooperating fully with authorities as an investigation was launched into the incident. In the wake of the tragedy, the governor of San Andres, Ever Hawkins, publicly expressed his condolences and emphasized the need for immediate reforms. He acknowledged that while the island thrives on tourism, safety measures had not kept pace with the growing number of visitors. He proposed new restrictions on boating in designated swimming zones and called on lawmakers to act swiftly to protect both locals and tourists from similar accidents in the future. This was not the first such tragedy on the island, and for many, it highlighted a systemic failure to enforce marine safety protocols. Uranus's death became a painful reminder of the urgent need for change. As her family prepared for her funeral, they were left to mourn a daughter and sister whose life was full of promise. What began as a joyful vacation ended in heartbreak, leaving behind grief, calls for accountability, and a haunting lesson about the cost of neglecting basic safety.